So let's take a look at this situation. We have a cylinder that is required to apply a certain amount of force. Actually, there's a range of force, which is really nice. It's really nice to have this range of force in here. So we're going to have to apply at least 180 pounds and 190 pounds of force. Now, I'm working with a system pressure of 60 psi. Now, sometimes you have the ability to deal with the pressure, so you can change the pressure. But then again, that means you have to add a pressure regulator. So if you're stuck with running with 60 psi, or another example is you could be running a pneumatic pump, not a compressor, but a pneumatic pump. Pneumatic pumps often are going to give you lower pressure because they use diaphragms in them, and they're going to have a lower pressure. And often you're not going to use a pressure regulator on a pneumatic pump. I'll show you a pneumatic pump. So this is a little tiny guy. This is actually for medical devices. Actually, all the ones that I have are for medical devices. And this is the kind of little pump that you'll find in a blood pressure cuff machine. This thing produces about 12 or 15 psi, depending on the manufacturer or whatever. And these get a little tired over time because they're diaphragms inside. So, but you're stuck to like 12 psi. You cannot go any higher than that. This guy gives you a lot more flow rate. But again, yeah, like you can't get more than about 15 or 16 psi to this guy. And this guy actually gives you a higher pressure. This thing will go up to about 22 psi. It has much firmer diaphragms in it. And there are actually 4 little tiny diaphragms in here, and there's a really cool mechanism in here. So again, this is a pneumatic pump. Now, this is actually a compressor, but it's a diaphragm compressor, and it's also kind of considered a pump. This thing will produce about 25 or 30 psi. And that's about it. So these guys are really limited. So you're not going to put pressure regulators on here. If you need to, say, use this thing, and you needed to apply a certain amount of force, you would go in and choose a cylinder that was dealing with, say, 20 psi, and you would have to go choose a bore to be able to apply that amount of force. So in some cases, you're stuck with a pressure. So in this case, we're stuck with 60 psi, and that's fine. We can work with 60 psi. So what's the bore diameter? Well, let's just take a look at the math. What you're going to do first is you're going to calculate the bore diameter that is going to give you exactly 180 pounds. You're going to go on the lower side, and then you're just going to find a larger bore diameter, and then you're going to be able to creating more force than the most minimum value. So in this case, these numbers worked out really well because at 1.95 bore diameter, so if you've got a bore diameter of exactly 1.95 inches, then you would produce exactly 180 pounds of force at 60 psi. But you're not going to find a bore diameter like that. You'll find a 2-inch bore diameter. It's very common. So what you're going to do is you're recalculating the force for a 2-inch to see if you're going to go beyond, because that's going to create more force. You're going to see if you're going to go beyond that maximum range, which is 190. So in this case, you're going over. You're going to go. You're going to go under 190. You're producing with a 2-inch bore. With a 2-inch bore, you're producing 188 pounds of force, which is nice. There you go. So it's perfect. So go buy a 2-inch bore in this particular situation. But if for some reason the limitation was in between 180 and 185. What do? You're stuck buying a 2-inch cylinder. You're not going to find it. You can go have one made. You're going to pay a lot of money to have a cylinder made to exactly that specification. Go buy a 2-inch cylinder, and then also go buy a pressure regulator and dial the pressure down just slightly. Dial it down to 55 psi, or recalculate the pressure required with a 2-inch cylinder that will give you a force in between here, and then set the pressure there. But that's going to cost you more because you're going to have to buy a pressure regulator. But that's if you're stuck with a very specific force. In this case, it had a nice little range. So I hope that makes sense. And it's important that you get this because this is a very common practice. You're going to be having to select pneumatic cylinders with a particular system pressure that require that say this thing has to apply a certain amount of force. You're going to need to be able to do that. So yeah, have fun with that. Okay, bye.